Could you tell us about the format of this show? Is quite different from the first one. You're only interviewing one person. Could you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, so this episode or this program about neoliberalism is more of a, like, I felt like I'd had a lot of knowledge myself, I guess, and I wanted to sort of say that stuff, and it was more of a educational, factual thing, I guess, about what the theory itself, what neoliberalism itself is about, whereas some of the other programs are more about people's personal perspectives or opinions. I don't know if that distinction is a solid one, but anyway, I went into it feeling like I had something specific to say, and so I kind of roughly planned it a little bit more before I decided who to interview and stuff. But so yeah, I kind of made an outline of what I wanted the program to say, and I did start off intending to interview maybe 3 or 4 different people, different academics, and I wanted it to be academic specifically because I wanted the conversation to be like, I really wanted to avoid having people just ranting about neoliberalism, because that was the whole point of the show, was to kind of to have a more informed and sort of coming from that position where you can just really listen to something, even though you really disagree with it, to just kind of take a step back and really listen to something to try and understand it, which I think academia and academics are particularly good at. So I kind of started off planning to interview several people, but then the first person I got in touch with was Clive Gabbai, who's a lecturer. I can't remember his specific job title, but he's a lecturer at my university, Queen Mary, and he's done a lot of research about neoliberalism and social movements, against neoliberalism and so on. So I started off speaking to him, and we had a conversation in his office, which went on for about 45 minutes or something like that. And I actually ended up including pretty much all of it, because I thought it was just really good. I mean, it really covered everything I wanted to say. He said really great things, and it felt really, really good. And also, it felt like it was like a whole conversation, because it kept referring back to the similar kind of ideas, and it felt like it evolved in a natural way. Whereas if I would have cut out different bits of it, it wouldn't have made as much sense. So I kind of just ended up keeping that conversation, and then afterwards I wrote this kind of 10-minute talk that I did to start off the show, where I kind of say some of the more background things, because the conversation with Clive ended up being more about the here and now of neoliberalism, and not covering so much of the more dry, sort of stuff about its history and stuff like that. And I ended up talking about capitalism, which is a big thing that I've been trying to understand better in my academic work, much more directly, even more than neoliberalism. And what I was trying to do with my little spiel about capitalism was to try and narrow down what capitalism is. Because I think, and that's the whole point about the neoliberal thing as well, the whole point about this program, I think, is about, or one of the big things I wanted to do is about making it more tangible these concepts and what these theories are actually about, because neoliberalism is often seen as something like kind of vague. So you can't really put your finger on it, and therefore you can't really understand what neoliberalism isn't. And I think it's important to understand, what you're against, so that you can be for something else. And so my definition of capitalism is, I realise that it's very narrow, and some people would criticise that, but I take that very narrow view from people like J.K. Gibson Graham, who are really, really good writers on capitalism. And for them it's a very meaningful political tool to narrow down capitalism in this way, to show that there are very many other ways of existing out there, and that exist already. I mean, they talk about capitalism as being just the tip of the iceberg of different kinds of economic relations and productive relations that we're doing already now, that are not capitalist, that exist out there, coexist together with capitalism, and they think that it's misleading to talk about capitalism as being the only thing that defines our society, because that's attributing way too much power to capitalism itself, and it kind of makes anti-capitalism unrealistic. Whereas if you realise that capitalism is only part of what's going on, that's quite a powerful thing. You can think, wow, there's actually other things going on out there, and have been this whole time, and we can do that more, I guess. Another sort of thing that I didn't really end up talking about that much in the programme is about this, or explicitly anyway, is this thing about human nature. And I do say several times in the programme that neoliberalism is very much built on certain assumptions about human nature. That humans are like self-interested and that we need incentives, like selfish incentives in order to do anything at all. I actually did a talk about capitalism recently in London, and someone made a comment afterwards and said, because I'd mentioned human nature in passing in the talk, and they kind of said, actually that's a really, really key point, because I think once you define to people what capitalism is, I don't think that most people would actually agree that it's a good political system or like economic system. I think most people would find it outrageous that you have owners and who make all the money and workers who make no money even though they do all the work and stuff like this. But I think what, and this person was saying, like maybe what is the hard thing to sell people on is these assumptions about human nature being unfounded. And I mean that is something that we come back to in the programme a lot, both me and Clive, and sort of point out that this is built on certain assumptions about humans, that we're selfish or whatever, that don't have any proof, you know, like not that there's any other proof proving anything else about human nature, but, and as I kind of say in the show as well, it's like to a certain extent we have to decide what view we want to take of human nature, or what view we want to do with that information or lack of information. And I think so I think that's a really key. I kind of wish I would have focused on it more, almost like showing that maybe it's this trying to dispel myths about human nature being competitive and selfish. Maybe that's where the political struggle is, maybe more so than thinking of alternative theories of economies.
There should be another show on that.
Yeah, and I do talk about in the show about philosophy, moral philosophy, with Dr. Callie Grill, which is later in the series as well.